Hello, this is Faith at House Front Homestead. We're going to see how this goes. I'm in a slightly different change of scenery today. I'm house sitting. But I have had something on my mind the last few days and have been in New Year's resolution mode, as have most of you, I'm sure. And just had a thought that I thought might be constructive for some folks that pertains to something I'm trying to address in my own life. And that is, at least for me, in the past, I have, I think, over identified with some of my issues and limitations and preferences and experiences, and have reached a point with them where they're sort of holding me back. For a very long time, well, at least several recent years, I've identified as anything from asexual to aromantic to autistic to schizoid personality disorder to child free, all of these things. And there is a point where identification can be liberating, especially if you feel inferior to the norm and the status quo. It can be freeing to know that there's a word for your experience, and it can lead some folks in some cases to diagnoses and life-changing help, and I'm not trying in any way to dismiss that, but I think there comes a point where identification can become its own limitation and its own box. And it keeps, at least in my case, it kept me in a state of defensiveness where I was eventually serving the identification more than the identification was serving me, and the label was wearing me more than I was wearing the label, if that makes sense. I've noticed that when I think of myself as ADD or autistic or asexual, etc., I have experiences that line up with that label. And there are ways in which it can build community as well, and there are ways in which it can validate experiences. But I'm trying to challenge myself this year to, instead of thinking about, basically what I'm thinking about is, in what I've observed is, it's tempting to make yourself other than so that you don't feel less than. But I think there's a step beyond that to aspire to, and I can't say I'm there by any stretch of the imagination, but what if instead of less than or other than, you were more than? And the whatever labels and identifiers you have ascribed yourself to were not the full picture. What if you were, or I'm trying to keep this personal, bigger than asexuality or being child free or whatever? What experiences would that open you up to? What defenses would soften if you weren't trying to stand firm in your own experience to the expense of future experiences? And what if instead of identities or I guess, looked to values as guidance? What if instead of identifying as a good person, which means it would be out of alignment for you to experience being wrong or bad about anything, what if you were guided by a desire to do good? Maybe that would, it's a scary thing, it does make you vulnerable in some ways, but what would that open you up to? Would that perhaps allow in feedback that could reinforce your desire to be a good person or to do good in the world without threatening your identity as a good person? What if being guided by a desire to, self-individuate could open you up to something bigger than boxes? I think our culture is at a half step, I think, in realizing that there's a more colorful tapestry of experience than the few boxes we already have allow us to grow into, but I don't know if more boxes with their own limitations and more schemas is necessarily where to stay at, that that it's a destination. I think it would be beneficial to transcend that in some ways and see that if we're all more than our boxes, we have a lot in common and we can cooperate a lot more. And all of a sudden, the people outside of us are no longer others. They are not the neurotypicals to our neurodivergence or something like that. They're people who might have a common goal and a common value system that we could work together with and overcome some of our limitations that way. And none of it is to dismiss anyone's experience or talk anyone out of identities. I get that they're people defend them for a reason, and that's because they have been dismissed by others in the past, and none of this is to say that that is the goal. And this can also go for, like, if you identify as a red-blooded American male, that also, can be a limiting identity. It's just to say that I have, in the short time I have been experimenting with this, found a lot more of the world opened up to me and accepted me without me suppressing myself when I let myself be more than the boxes. And it didn't become something I had to be defensive of or adversarial against. And I think experiences are mutable, and if we're growing, we're eventually going to outgrow any boxes we put ourselves in. And before rushing into a new box, I would just encourage anyone who's also feeling limited by boxes to just let yourself be undefined for a bit and see what changes and what pops up and what opportunities avail themselves. So that's just my spiel for the day. It's just been something I've been thinking on, but I think it would be beneficial to be guided by values rather than limited by identities. So hope someone got something out of it, and if you didn't, just take what resonates and leave the rest. And if you have any thoughts on this, let me know. Keep it civil. And until next time, see ya.